I also did not go to a four-year college, so I went to tech school and started that about 5.5 years ago here in Kansas City at Centric. So that's my story.
I'm Matthew Renzi. I'm an independent software and data science consultant with over 16 years of experience building large-scale, data-driven desktop server and cloud-based applications. Double degrees in computer science and philosophy, minor in economics, and focus was on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I'm an author for Pluralsight and ASP Insider. I've also worked on some pretty cool open source software projects as well. That's my story.
Kent, before we get to you, can everybody hear us all right? Here's good? All right. Go ahead, Kent.
Cool, thanks. So I don't have 16 years experience, but my name is Kent C. Dodd. I do primarily JavaScript, and I'm an Egghead.io author. I'm from Utah. I work for PayPal. I have a podcast called JavaScript Air, so if you're into JavaScript and the web platform, check that out. And I also do a lot of open source stuff, giving a talk about that tomorrow. So, that's me.
I'm Kirsten Hunter. I'm an API evangelist at Akamai. I have about 20 years of experience as a developer, but I have 10 years of experience working with developers trying to use REST APIs. So one of the things I do is try to make the experience of using APIs as delightful as possible for developers. And so I'm here to talk about mostly interpreted languages. Also, I don't have a 4-year CS degree. I have a degree in philosophy, so there's lots of different paths to success.
Hello, I'm Ben Cottrell, one of the founders of DoodleKit. It's the easiest way for a small business to create their own website. You can use by millions of people in 180 different countries. My background is in software architecture and development. I've worked at small companies, large companies, Java, Ruby, JavaScript, all kinds of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. So again, this is a panel discussing the things that you should be learning as a developer. So we've got a load of questions, and we will open it up to the audience eventually for your questions. But the first question that I had was for you, Heather. What are some languages or tools that are immediately stand out as necessities for a modern developer today?
Well, really, any of the modern programming languages you should latch onto. Just pick one and go with it, but kind of look into their main purpose. So if you want to go ahead and be in the enterprise space and you want a good secure job, pick up something like C# or Java. They're almost timeless at this point, right? No language is completely immune from change. But that's my first suggestion. If you want to be in a more, in my opinion, exciting space, like I do mobile development, and I started out as a Xamarin developer, which is also done in C#, and I recently picked up Swift, because Swift is actually a pretty cool language, and Google and Facebook and Uber are considering adopting it as first-class languages for their platforms, too. So that's probably, depending on the direction you want to go. When it comes to additional libraries, Unity all the way. Pick it up because it's becoming more and more prevalent in augmented reality and virtual reality. So pick your poison. Do you want to do something traditional? Do you want to do something that's more immersive? Pick the language that suits the plan.
I'm going to take the more data science kind of approach, since that's what I specialize in. So obviously you've got to have your general purpose programming languages as your bread and butter, so things like C#, C, Java, stuff like that. But right now, the programming language R is extremely popular for doing data science, because its ability to slice and dice and manipulate data is almost unparalleled. In addition, Python right now is in a lot of competition in the data science space with R. SQL, surprisingly, is actually the most popular language or most valuable language for doing data science, simply because so many data scientists coming out of university have no SQL language experience. And surprisingly, and I hate to admit it, but Excel is still the most popular tool in the business world for doing data visualization and data analysis. I also agree with the Unity for virtual realities. I'm currently working on an open source interactive data visualization tool that's using the Unity engine in order to build those immersive data visualizations. And with the Internet of Things, having embedded programming knowledge, if you want to get into IoT, you've got to know C language or some low-level language that runs on a Raspberry Pi, something like that.
So actually, I have a little bit of a different perspective. So as a JavaScript developer, I am just completely floored by how many platforms JavaScript can run on. And so, as a JavaScript developer, I could just stick with JavaScript, and I can write for the web, I can write for desktop, I can write for mobile, I can write IoT, all with JavaScript. So for me, that's really exciting. But if front end isn't your thing, well, you still have the back end with Node and stuff, but if JavaScript isn't your thing, it's still an important thing to know, because regardless of what you end up doing, you'll probably write some JavaScript because it's just so ubiquitous. And if you're going to do anything for the web, you're going to be doing JavaScript eventually. So from the perspective of actually what you should learn, whether you go deep into JavaScript or not, you should probably learn JavaScript.
I'm going to agree with Kent here. I know all of the interpreted languages myself, so Python, Perl, Ruby, Node, and PHP. And I started out with Perl because the problems I was trying to solve were most appropriately solved by Perl. What I would do is I would say, try to figure out the problem that you're trying to solve. If you're not in a university class or you're not doing something formal, find something that you want to build, and then figure out how to build it. Maybe you'll find a mentor that'll help you get the tools that you need. Stack Overflow is a great way to find answers. It's not magic. It just takes a little bit of practice to figure it out. Sites like Code Academy are fantastic. You can sort of dip your toe into a bunch of different languages and see which one feels good to you. So really, it's more about solving a problem, feeling like you've really accomplished something, than it is picking a particular programming language to start out with.
Could I jump on to that really quick? So I so agree with that. And one thing that I think is really important for us to remember is the best way to learn something is kind of backwards from the way that we learned it in school. Like the teacher, I think some schools are getting better at this, but the teacher will often say, okay, this is how you do, this is how you calculate the area underneath the sine wave. And I'm like, I don't care about that. But why don't you first say, what we're going to do today is we're going to make a Sphero move. We're going to eventually build this cool robot. And so you're really excited about that because you're like, sweet, I'm going to build a robot. That's so awesome. And then you work backwards into the things you need to learn to accomplish that. So I think that's kind of what you were saying, Kirsten, is find something that's exciting to you and then learn what you need to do to build that. Whether, regardless of what language it is, just find what you want to do and then just do that.
I agree with you too that not only about finding a problem, but the quick answer is learn JavaScript because it's definitely very, very popular right now. But I would also think about where do you want to take your career. Do you want to just go to a corporate shop? Well, you should probably learn .NET or Java. Do you want to work at a startup? You should probably be looking at JavaScript, Ruby, that type of thing. So kind of think about not just what problems you want to solve, but also where do you want to take your career in the long term.
Passion goes a long way. So if you're passionate about something, learn it, whether you have the background or not. I'm learning that with VR right now. I don't have any background at all to support some of the physics engines and create the algorithms that I need for it. So I'm educating myself because I'm so excited about this space. It kind of fuels the learning process.
So we've already heard several times some emerging trends in technology, augmented reality, IoT. Was curious about what tech trends do you see or advancements that people need to be cognizant of in continuing their learning?
I think the biggest thing for me is that augmented reality is not a fad. It is a game changer, absolutely. It's different than VR, and I really enjoy VR, but augmented reality will provide more than just a game experience. It'll start truly enhancing the way that we learn, the way we train for sport, because it's not tethered to any sort of computer. The computer's built into it. Of course, I'm specifically talking about HoloLens right now, but there will be other sets that come out in the future. And just keep your eyes on it because that is where a lot of the enterprise space will probably move into.
For me, the three biggest trends that I see right now are the ones that are most important and will have fundamental changes on society as we know it. The Internet of Things, big data, and then machine learning. Essentially, these are all feeding into one another, and so we've got massive troves of sensors collecting massive amounts of data that are stored in massive servers, spread out all over the internet. And then we have these machine learning algorithms that can take these massive troves of data from all these sensors and make sense of it. But what's happening is we're going to eventually close this loop so that there's no human being involved in the decision-making process anymore. So the entire system, which experts refer to as cyber-physical systems, that's going to be the next big buzzword in another 5 years or so, essentially are fully autonomous environments like your house, your automobiles, all of these things that no longer require human intervention. They close that loop and completely do what they need to do, optimize some kind of objective function within a dynamic environment of some kind. That and VR is going to be huge for the entertainment industry.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, and I can't really add anything to what you said. So, but I on kind of maybe not exactly what you're talking about, but another trend in programming that I see is functional programming. I think that's just so huge. And it's not just functional programming, but the idea of seeing what other like paradigms and design patterns are available in other languages and how you can apply that to what you're doing. JavaScript is a great example because you can kind of bend it to your will, it being such a dynamic programming language. But in particular, right now, functional programming is huge, and I recommend that you give it a look if you haven't yet.
Yeah, I totally agree. I will go more in the how we're using the big data. One of the things that's a really big thing right now is the quantified self. I know somebody who is actually making a bunch of sensors that work together with his blood glucose meter and his automatic insulin pump, and so he's out of the equation. It just does exactly what it needs to do to give him the right amount of insulin. The talk I'm doing tomorrow on quantified fitness actually has my Fitbit actually causing things to happen without me looking at it directly. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is calm technology. Technology where you don't have to ask the technology what's happening. You just sort of ambiently get the information you want. And that's one of the really exciting things that we're getting out of the big data and being able to analyze the information about ourselves.
So I'm at the end of the line, so like all the good answers are taken.
We'll go the other way next time.
Yeah, so I would say, definitely look into things like serverless architectures, microservices, single-page apps, React, Angular, I could go on. But really, I think the most important thing is to always be learning and always be looking for something new. There's the book The Pragmatic Programmer, which is like 20 years old now. It still applies. And one of the things that they talk about is learning a new language every year, even if you're not going to use it. When I kind of went back and forth between Java and Ruby, and learning things in Ruby kind of helped me be a better Java programmer and vice versa.
It's the same thing with the functional languages. Even if you never program with a functional language in your life, it fundamentally changes the way you think about software. Things like the lambda calculus that you won't learn if you aren't actually using functional languages. You'll never run into that in declarative or procedural languages.
Well, just in my brief conversations with some of you, you arrived in technology in some rather unconventional ways. So I'm curious, are universities still the best route to become a developer? Or we'll start with you, Ben. Sorry.
So I think that if you're going to get into computer science, definitely. I think that it's really hard to teach that to yourself. If you're going to kind of be more of a web developer, app developer, I don't see a lot of value. I was just talking with somebody earlier. I read an article about how the time it takes for a university to come up with curriculum is years, and by the time they come up with curriculum, it's already obsolete. I started doing programming because I wanted to make a website for my punk band. I think that's a good place to start, right? Start with a problem. Start with something that you're passionate about. But yeah, I think it kind of depends on which way you want to go. Universities, it could be good or it could be a waste of time.
I'm going to say the university is not necessarily what you need. It's good for some people. But even at the computer science and theory level, you can learn that stuff. But you would want to start with problem solving first, and then become more involved. I have a BA in philosophy, as I said. I started learning Perl because I saw a bunch of our salespeople were having a bunch of very frustrating experiences, and I could make tools to solve those problems. And I learn things all the time. I'm very, very curious. This is one of the biggest things to keep yourself up to date with computer science is not to get stagnant. You know, it's a lifetime learning sort of thing. So you don't have to start with the university. I know that a lot of women and minorities are having issues in the computer science at universities, and I want people to understand that that's not the only path to success. So if you're curious about computer science and you want to do computer science and you're not digging the university experience, then go a different way.
Yeah, I would agree. What Ben described as like the curriculum being outdated by the time it's taught to the students, that was totally my experience. I graduated with a master's in information systems just 2 years ago, and like they were teaching us stuff that is not at all applicable today, and even wasn't very applicable in that day. And so, I would say that the benefit that I got from getting a master's degree was mostly getting my foot in the door with other companies when I got started. But all the extra work that I've done in the community and in open source is the reason that I got all the jobs after my first one. And so, honestly, my education, while valuable for me getting started, I don't really have anything that I took away from my education that is applicable today. So if I were to do it over again, I might try a boot camp to get into it, and then just work like crazy on my own time to build things and try things out. Because that's basically what I've done since I graduated, and that's where I've learned pretty much everything that's been valuable to me.
So I'm going to have to nerd out here a little bit. I actually have 5 degrees in total, but one of those degrees is a degree in philosophy. So one of the things that we do is we learn to take like 2 diametrically opposed ideas and then argue in defense of both of them. So that's actually what I'm going to do here. So the argument for going to a 4-year university, or at least the strongest argument I'm aware of, is that the software development profession, or I don't even know if we can call it a profession yet, is relatively immature compared to other like professions like engineering, science, like most of the science fields as well too. So the only reason most people are probably able to get into software development right now as a career is because the industry is so immature. We don't have the normal certification, qualifications and stuff that the other more mature disciplines do. So in another few years, it might not be possible to just go through without a 4-year degree and just go into software development. They may require it. It's just that's the bare minimum level of entry. On the other side, however, we're seeing a fundamental shift in education right now. There is more and more education transitioning into online courses, and not just from like these kind of fly-by-night schools. These are highly reputable organizations like Johns Hopkins University has an entire data science specialization online now as well too. Most of the machine learning courses through Stanford are online as well. Lots of statistics, data science stuff. So in another 5 years, while you may have to have a 4-year degree, a 4-year degree might be totally different in 5 years than what it is right now. So to be completely honest, I actually have no idea.
Well, I think that the overarching theme here is that learn how you learn best. So I'm not very patient. I commend you for going through that 5 times, Renzi, but I couldn't go through a year of having to go to a class that I didn't enjoy. So I think really it depends on you. Learn how to self-propel yourself, because you are going to learn all the time to remain relevant as an engineer in this field. So don't think, okay, I went to my college, I went to my boot camp, I'm done learning. You are never done learning. It is always at the same pace. It's always intense learning. But you can't just learn, you have to apply. I can read 1 billion books, but if I don't actually build anything with a beacon, then I'm not actually going to apply any of that and take it to the next level, which is experience. You can have experience and not have ever worked for Google or any software company. You can have fantastic amounts of experience, just playing around. That makes you relevant in our industry. So become relevant by forcing yourself to learn, whether that is a college or not. In my opinion, there's no reason, monetarily or otherwise, to not get into this field. There is always a way for you to become a software engineer.
Well, if you just arrived or if your face is buried in a hamburger, this is a panel discussion on being a lifelong learner as a developer. So one of the next questions that I have is about entrepreneurial spirit as a developer, and all of us here, I think, have our own entrepreneurial ventures. So was curious about your thoughts on, we often see developers with quote-unquote side hustles, and was curious about how that may feed into continuing your education, or your thoughts on the importance of maybe thinking entrepreneurially as a developer.
I vote Ben goes first while I think about this.
Maybe we can start with Ben.
Okay, so I've been side hustling for 10 years, and there's probably a lot of recruiters in this room that I've said, no, I don't want a full-time job because I want to keep working on my side project, and I want to kind of be flexible. It's really tough, and I think that it's really important, though, to kind of have a career first and have something that you do. It's really hard to just become an entrepreneur. But it's not as hard as you have 5-10 years of experience programming to then turn that into a business. But you got to realize that that's a different animal. It's a different mindset. You're going to become almost a different person to learn how to run a business, because we think of it as, oh, I've got this idea for a product and I can build that product. Well, that's cool, but then there's a whole business side of it that's outside of that.
In a standard sense, I would say I don't really have an entrepreneurial spirit. I make a lot of toys. I explore a lot of things. I made an L-wire vest that changed colors depending on which way you were facing. I made a couple of applications based on Netflix that improved the search. These are a lot of people were like, hey, are you going to make a company out of that? No, it's not my thing. But again, curiosity is really what drives me, and it needs to be what drives you. When you're starting, you need to have a passion for solving a particular problem. As you mentioned, you might say, hey, I'm going to make a product and make a company around it. That's not going to work out really well if you don't have a particular problem or a particular user who has a problem that you're solving. So make sure that you're coming from that angle. I want to solve this. I want to cause this to happen. And then I can build a company around it because I know there's other people who have that same issue.
So I also wouldn't say I necessarily have an entrepreneurial spirit, or it could just be that I'm a young father of 3 children and I don't want to risk that. But I do get excited about these ideas that I have. I once had a brilliant idea that would crush Facebook, and it was like going to be the best thing ever. I built it, a prototype, it was awesome, but I didn't have, I guess, what it took to really just drive it home. I was more interested in just playing around, and I think that's okay. Not everybody just really wants to build their own business, and I think that's fine. Really, you find what you're interested in doing, and you go and do that, and you'll experience, have so many great experiences to teach you.
And so I'm an independent software consultant and data science consultant. So I've been essentially hustling for many years now. And software consulting really isn't for everyone. In fact, I think there's a very specific set of skills that you have to possess, and personality traits as well too. You have to have the right risk tolerance. You have to have a certain amount of social skills. Most important, you have to be able to give your client a very warm and fuzzy feeling. But so I consider myself an entrepreneur, and I come from family of entrepreneurs as well. Most of my siblings own their own businesses. My dad did, my grandpa and my great grandpa as well too. So it's always kind of been in my DNA, and I think I was conditioned as a child to have a bit of that risk tolerance. So if you're interested in applying entrepreneurship into the software world, I think the best way to do it, if you have that right propensity and set of skills, is to get into independent software consulting. There's all sorts of people that are more than willing to help you learn how to become a consultant. I sat on panels to teach about what you should do. In fact, I'm at Iowa State University every year telling the students about the possibility of becoming either software consultants or independent consultants as well. So there's a lot of lessons you need to learn over the years, so you don't just want to go into it right away. You got to be able to give the clients that warm and fuzzy feeling, and just have the right set of skills. And the other thing is, you'll learn that you are your worst boss ever. You will hate being your own boss, but you eventually learn how to work around that too.
Well, you touched on something very important. I actually recently rewatched some of the episodes of Silicon Valley, and I couldn't help but think, all he really wanted to do was to create a better algorithm. Like, at the end of the day, I just want to make something really freaking cool, and it'd be great if other people picked it up. And then what happens if someone picks it up? Suddenly, you got to, go to business school practically to figure out how to be a communicator. We don't communicate very well as engineers traditionally in this space. So it's one of those situations where you have to ask yourself, is your product the one thing that you want to pursue that can spread? Or is it that you want to just keep creating different, very cool stuff? Sometimes the product starts outgrowing you and you have to grow to sustain it. I've discovered that if you really say, I want to be an entrepreneur, is it because you want to be your own boss? Is it because you want to be perpetually worried all the time as to whether or not you're going to get paid the next day? What is your dream? Is your dream financial freedom or to be the next Facebook? That's really where it comes from. There's way more work to be an entrepreneur, and I know I'm in year 4 of starting an agricultural company right now to monitor equestrian sports. But, I did that because I saw a need. Nobody was filling the need, and I'm like, well, I'm technical. I will solve the problem. So sometimes you become an entrepreneur out of necessity. There are more than one ways. I'm sorry to keep echoing this. There is more than one way to get there. It really comes down to motivation because it's additional work on top of being an engineer to be an entrepreneur.
I'd like to add a couple thoughts to that. Kirsten mentioned passion, and usually when somebody comes up and asks me, I've got this idea for an app, how can I create a business around it? The first thing I say is, are you so passionate about it that it literally keeps you up at night? You can't sleep because you can't stop thinking about it. Because if it's not, then you're not going to make it, because it's so hard to create a business. You have to have that passion to carry you through those hard times. The other thing I'll say is recognize if you are an engineer or an entrepreneur, there are different types of people and we have different types of brains. And just because you're not a person maybe that wants to create a business doesn't mean you can't create a product and sell that to somebody that can make a business out of it.
Great stuff, everyone. Well, we have some more time, and I wanted to open up to questions from the audience. We have 2 people up here in front, Andrea and Adam, in red shirts. They're waving right now. If you have a question, just raise your hand and they'll walk by, and you can voice your query. Anybody with a question? This is a panel on lifelong learning. Well, I have one in the meantime, as people formulate their thoughts. Are there any gaps in skills that you see among developers? Not necessarily technical skills, but are there career skills that people need to be thinking about that we need to start cultivating more?
Definitely soft skills, communication skills. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, and I think I've slowly come out of my shell from high school to now. I'm definitely more personable. I still hate networking. I still just hate it. But I do it. And I force myself to go up to a random person and just say, hey, how you doing? And it's really tough. But I think, it's just something you kind of have to work on and be aware of. But I think it's definitely, a gap there.
Yeah, I would say one of my strong suits is my soft skills, what gets me most of my job. But one of the things that I do is I translate between the developers and the front-end people. And I see a lot of times what happens, especially in APIs, which is my sort of area of expertise. We have an architect who decides to build an API. And I always say, why are you building this castle? And they're like, because and it'll have a moat, right? They're not trying to solve someone's problem. They just want to make something really cool. And the understanding of how someone's going to use your thing, how you want them to use it, what problem you're solving, this is a skill that really doesn't get taught in computer science, and it's lacking in a lot of our computer scientists. So understanding, think about things as the user will think about them is going to help you make a much better product.
I think there are a couple of thoughts I have on this. One skill that I think people need to develop is involvement in open source and involvement in the community. You are not too young to start teaching people. Like you learn something about a language or about a framework, and you can, like, all of a sudden you can teach that to somebody else. Anybody in this room can teach me something about Python. So seriously, don't hesitate to submit a talk proposal to a meetup or a conference. I've only been doing this for 2 years. I've spoken at a lot of conferences now. So yeah, that's one thing. Another thing is take advantage of opportunities to learn from your coworkers. I have had countless conversations, like water cooler conversations with coworkers. I learned what Git rebase does from a conversation, and like there are just so many opportunities to learn from others. Just having casual conversations, and then just like I can't stress enough the importance that being involved in the community has made on, or the impact that has made on my career. Like I can't even use words to describe that. It's been huge.
So I'm going to talk a little bit on both sides, but I don't think most software developers realize this, but your soft skills will get you much further along in the professional world than your technical skills ever will. You can be the best software developer ever, but if you're really difficult to work with, well, especially as a consultant, you won't get work because you've got to give people that warm and fuzzy feeling. So of the soft skills, in my opinion, the single most important soft skill you have to have as a software developer is communication. You have to be able to communicate very complex technical ideas to a third grader. Like essentially, if you can't explain what you're doing to a third grader, you do not understand it yourself. And so communication, being able to mentor other people, to be able to be mentored by other people is very important. I think emotional intelligence is very important as well too. And then on the tech side, if you have to have, what I think at least is the most important tech skill that I see not represented in the large software community is test-driven development. I honestly think this is so critical that the fact that everyone is not doing TDD kind of by default when they start programming, well, once again, in another 5 years, it is very plausible that TDD will be a minimum barrier of entry to being a software developer. If you are writing software for any professional organization, you'll have to do TDD.
For me, I don't think enough engineers ask the question why before they ask the question how. So, why am I building this? And then architecture before syntax. Really, something I've been learning lately is that as long as you have a good architectural approach, I could write this in C#, I could write this in Swift, I could write this in Java, JavaScript, but I need to understand good ways of building software, period. And you can learn that on your own right up front if you want to understand different patterns and approaches. But just starting to code something, you may make something sort of work, but you may introduce a whole lot more problems because you don't really know what you're working towards. Agile development is something that has, I really agree with, and I think it works really well, as long as you ask the why before you ask the how. Otherwise, you're just writing a piece and you don't see the bigger picture. See the bigger picture, then code it.
Great. We've got a question. All right.
Hello. Yes. I'm Kirsten Fells with Oakwood Systems, and I'm a front-end developer. And one of the questions that I want to put towards the panel is how do you deal with not completely removing yourself from the processes that you build? For example, in many instances, I am or have in the past been made to build solutions that I wouldn't even use. But then I have to go in and build those solutions. As counterintuitive as they could possibly be, I'm still charged with having to build that. So I guess the question is twofold. One, how do you keep yourself from doing that in your own respective roles? And the second part is, how do you navigate educating the end user or the client on the importance of putting more reliance in your ability to not create those products that they wouldn't even want to use themselves?
Well, I think one of the things that you really want to do, someone will come to you and say, I want a kitchen sink. And you'll be like, okay, here's your kitchen sink. Well, what they really wanted was a dishwasher. You have to find out what problem they're trying to solve and convince them that, in fact, you are better at solving the problem if you know what the problem is, as opposed to creating the solution that they've already come up with. And in terms of removing yourself from the process, there's just nothing that can be documentation and communication. You have to make sure that the process, ugly as it may be, is documented completely so they know how to use it, so that all of the answers that you would be giving are available for them to consume without you.
I think also, like what you were talking about just a second ago is like ask why before you ask how. So when somebody comes to you and says, hey, we're going to build it and this is the design or this is what we're going to do, you could ask, why is that really important? Do we even need this feature? What % of our users will use this? And if it's like 1%, then you can say, that's going to take me 2 weeks. I really don't think that's worth the company's time. We have these other bugs to fix or whatever. Another thing is, like, at the end of the day, you have to get paid, and so, like, you're going to, you should probably do it, whatever it is they ask. But if it's really something that you're not interested in doing, then go find somewhere else to work. I had a job where I was working for a company where we were dog fooding our product, and it was like a terrible experience. I was like, I would never use this product. I would, if my company bought this product and I had to use it, I would not be happy about that at all. And so the fact that I'm building this product, yeah, sure, I can spend years of my life trying to make it better into something that I would use. But instead, I'll just go work somewhere else where I believe in the product and I'm excited about it and I understand the use cases better. So, like, at the end of the day, you need to get paid, and like, you can't push back as developers. But if you're not able to push back, then there are other places to work.
So I really want to start this by telling the story about the worst piece of software I've ever written, but the fact that it's actually probably still in production in a county neighboring the Kansas City area. For liability reasons, I'm not going to discuss it or name it or anything. But what I will say, though, is that now obviously this requires trust between the development team and the shareholders, the stakeholders in the software product, usually through like a product owner as well. And if you've got the right amount of trust, there should be this balanced attention between the team pulling for quality and the stakeholders like pulling for more features. This tension between the two essentially creates really good like work environments for creating really high quality software. Now, if there's if one side steamrolls the other, you could end up with software that's really high quality, but no features are getting shipped out the door, or you've got a pile of features, but now you've got a pile of spaghetti code as well too. So one of the things as a consultant that I do is I'm always very cognizant of quality, trying to maintain very high software quality, and helping the team to kind of pull back so that if we're pushing too many features out the door, we're like, no, we need to slow down, think about why, is it more important, or are we going to have to rewrite this another few years anyways? So maintaining this high quality is really important, and it requires this trust to exist. In addition, the other thing, asking why, I think that's huge. And the other thing you want to be doing is trying to figure out empirical ways to validate whether the features you're building and the quality of the features that you're building is good or not. So having good agile processes that create feedback loops, and the faster you can get these feedback loops, or the faster time to feedback, the quicker you will learn how to build good, high-quality software that's meeting the user's needs as quick as possible, and hopefully with as little cost as possible.
Actually,
That's a great point. I love this question because it's an essential survival skill of almost everybody in this room. How do I have pride in my work when I really don't want to build this piece of software, right? That's what we're asking. How do you keep going? Well, luckily, we can separate that, right? That's good architectural style. You can separate the quality of your code from the point of what you are trying to deliver. It's important. You can still learn how to deliver something that's really, like you said, high quality, even if you don't agree with the features. Sometimes you don't have any control over what those features are. I've chosen, for many reasons, to not be in environments that depressed me. So I want to make sure that I'm in an environment that's exciting. By virtue of being at this conference, you guys are in the top percent of all the engineers in the area because you have invested time in continuing to learn and continuing to get better. There is always a job for you at a place you would actually enjoy if you don't like what you're shipping. But that's what I would say.
Go ahead.
Okay, just really quick, one thing that I forgot was that often business people are interested in numbers, and so if you can figure out some way to get data to substantiate your claim that this is counterintuitive, then that would be great. So if your company doesn't have a user acceptance or usability testing or something, look into doing something like that, because if you feel like this feature is counterintuitive and you can say, yeah, you think that 80% of our users will use this, but if it's implemented in the way that you're suggesting, I'd say that 80% of them will start using it and then they will all hate it and will lose business. If you can bring it back to numbers, this kind of applies to anything when trying to convince a business of something, whether to rewrite or to refactor or something. You say, okay, so this is slowing us down enough that we are losing money. So bringing it back to actual numbers and money is really, really helpful to convincing business people to do stuff you want them to do.
Just to tee off that, don't assume that you can't push back. It's kind of part of your job is to push back, and if you can state a clear case and say this is the way that you should do it, and they still say no, then that's probably when you should find another job. And the last thing I'll say is I hope everyone in this room knows that you are in a developer's market. This is your time. You can you can do very, very well just with a little experience. So don't ever think that you can't go find another job, because they're out there.
Awesome. Well, we are all out of time. Thank you very much. If we could give a round of applause to our panelists here. Again, I'm Bobby Birch from Startland News. We're a publication that covers tech and entrepreneurship in Kansas City. If you're interested in learning more about tech and entrepreneurship in Kansas City, we've got a 3 times a week digest, so check out startlandnews.com. Thanks a lot, everyone.